So what's on the bench for January 17th, 2018? I have a binding jig table that I'm working on right here. I have, as you can see some of them behind me, I have 3 different guitars that I'm in the process of completing a Tru Oil finish on. I have some new wood that I'm really excited about that I want to show you guys. Tiger Myrtle and Zriccati. Zriccati, as some might say. I have a Epiphone Zenith archtop guitar that someone brought in for me to do some repair and restoration work on. I don't do many repair or restoration items, so this one must really interest me because I'm doing it. And then finally I have some updates on the workshops for 2018. So the first thing I want to talk about isn't actually something on the bench, because it is a bench. It's this mobile workbench. See how it's on wheels? I'm building it to house not 1, but 2, where my coffee is, that's where the other binding tower will be. 2 binding towers so that I can dedicate one to binding ledges and the other one to purfling ledges. So my old binding setup looks like this. I have a Luthier's Mercantile binding tower clamped to the bench, and this setup works fine. In fact, it works really great, but I spend a lot of time changing bearings and resetting the cutter height and doing test cuts on scrap wood and all that between doing the cut for the binding ledge and the cut for the purfling ledge. So purely as a time-saving measure, I bought a second binding tower so I can have 1 binding tower for the binding ledge and 1 binding tower for the purfling ledge. So once I have my old binding tower set up installed onto the mobile workbench, the whole thing will look kind of like this. The one thing I'm a little bit concerned about is maybe I didn't leave enough room between the 2 to make it comfortable to run your instrument body on the one router and then run it on the other one without, say, your elbow getting in the way. But time will tell. We'll see how it works. Maybe I'll have to do something to expand it out a little bit that way. Now, I do use different binding and purfling for different projects, so I'm still going to need to adjust the bearings and the cutter height occasionally, but in general, it's really going to simplify things to have a dedicated router for each task. In fact, over the last year, business has been good, so I've spent a lot of time and money and invested a lot of mental energy into purchasing duplicate tools and creating dedicated workstations. So I can spend less time changing blades and bits and making adjustments on equipment, and I can spend more time being creative, designing and building things. So for example, as you can see to my left and my right, I have 2 bandsaws, duplicate bandsaws. There's my 14-inch Craftsman and my 10-inch Jet bandsaw. I keep a 3/4 inch very coarse blade with large teeth and large gullets between the teeth for things like resawing backs and sides or for just making very straight cuts. And I keep a smaller and less expensive blade on the Jet for just making those quick cuts in thinner material or for cutting curves, because the big blade obviously can't do that. I used to constantly change blades, and over the course of an entire build, that would actually add up to hours of adjusting the guideposts and setting the tracking and tension. I find that if you're going to get into dedicating equipment or tools to specific tasks, the easiest and most important area to do this in is with routers. I actually have 6 different routers around the shop for various reasons, and the only time that I have to change a bit, or that I ever remove a bit, is to clean the bit. I don't swap bits out between tasks anymore. So now back to this table. I installed my new binding jig here, and I'm going to install the old one here. Now you might wonder why I didn't just get a second Luthier's Mercantile binding tower jig if I liked it so much. And well, the reason is that I wanted to try out the StewMac one just so that I could compare it and see if one is better than the other. I'd imagine that I'm going to find that they're both pretty much the same, but I figured, hell, why not? Let's try it out. That way I can compare it and then come back with the results to you guys. So I have 3 guitars at the end stage of receiving a Tru Oil finish. I've applied all the coats and now I'm just waiting 2 weeks to make sure that that finish is really hard so that I can buff it out. This is a student's guitar from one of last year's workshops. He didn't have the time or the space to work on it at home himself, so he's paying me to do it. This is Nick's guitar, a project that I've been working on for free. In short, a young man in his 20s built this guitar body and then he passed away. I gave this body a neck, a fretboard, and a bridge and slapped some finish on it, and now I'm giving the guitar to his mother next week. And she has no idea that this is finished, so I think it'll be a big surprise. And finally, this Tasmanian Blackwood beauty is one of my own. I'm really excited to get to see all of these guitars once they're buffed out and looking nice and glossy. Anyway, this is the first time that I've ever hung up 3 guitars in a row all together like this and finished them all at the same time. Normally I would only be finishing 1 guitar at a time, but I installed 2 more of these swivel coat hanger things into the ceiling so that I can apply 3 coats across 3 guitars. Between all 3 of these guitars, I applied 72 coats of finish. That's really hard on your wrist. But it was worth it. I saved a lot of time. By the way, if you're interested in learning my method for applying Tru Oil finishes, my video course is now available at ericschaeferguitars.com for Tru Oil finishing. I have some very striking wood that I've picked up from Hearns Hardwoods in Oxford, PA, that I plan on using for 2 of my builds in 2018. And that is what I'm hiding under the purple towel here for a dramatic effect. And the first guitar that I'm building will be with Zriccati. And I know that I pronounced that wrong and that it's actually Zriccati. At some point I got it in my head that it was Zriccati, and I haven't changed ever since. So don't message me that I'm wrong. I know I am. Alright, so it's Zriccati, and as you can see, it just has this stunning landscape look to it. Very ethereal, very much a landscape depiction is what you get when you put all this together. And I really plan on making this an all-around Zriccati, there I said it correct that time, guitar, because I even got this billet here of Zriccati for the fretboard, bridge, and head plate complement. I say complement because I always like to, or not always, but often like to use the same wood from the same board to get a design motif that runs from the head plate down through the fretboard and into the bridge. And so basically this guitar will just be this stunning landscape design, the landscape being just the pattern that Zriccati creates, and it will wrap all the way around the guitar. I may even, I've been considering even using Zriccati for the neck, but there's a lot to consider there with the, when you get into neck woods, you really have to think about the modulus of elasticity and the modulus of rupture, which, not to throw too many words at you, but basically those 2 things along with some other parameters are what define strength. When we talk about strength as far as neck woods are concerned, we're really talking about a number of different factors. Again, modulus of elasticity, modulus of rupture. And we're talking about the combination of all those factors. We're never just looking at any one of them. So it's really kind of a complicated issue when you're looking for that strength to weight ratio that everyone talks about with neck woods. And because that issue is so complicated, that's why this one wood, Honduran mahogany, seems to always win out and be the only one that people talk about for neck woods. But there are other ones out there. It's just tricky trying to discern what's going to work and what's going to cause you problems. Probably more so than any other aspect of the guitar, considering that neck wood is very, very, very important. So I don't want to jump right into using Zriccati as a neck wood. but I might. We'll see. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to sit on it. I'm going to do some research. We'll see what happens. 2018 is a long year. And the second set of wood beneath the purple towel is tiger myrtle. Myrtle is the wood. Tiger just describes the figure, which, for obvious reasons, you can see how it gets its name. And with the tiger myrtle, I am thinking about using, for the fretboard, zebra wood. I'm not quite 100% sold yet on using the zebra wood with the tiger myrtle. I think aesthetically it's a very interesting combination. Actually, the guy who helped me, Ben at Hearns Hardwoods, who helped me pick out the woods I was going to use for the year, including these two amazing sets. When I mentioned that I want to use zebra wood with tiger myrtle, he said, oh, the predator-prey model. And I said, oh, that's very interesting. I never thought of it that way, but he's absolutely right. We have tiger and zebra. So it would be like the predator-prey guitar. I thought that was interesting. Anyway, not 100% sold on zebra wood as a fretboard wood. I've never heard of it being done. That's not to say that it can't be done, but, and I'm sure it has been done, I just haven't seen it. But tests need to be made by me. I need to try out this wood, fret a couple pieces of wood, even if I just make some arbitrary fret slots in a small scrap piece of the zebra wood and install some fret wire into there to see what happens, see if it frets easily, see if it bows out the wood with the pressure from the fret tangs. So a lot remains to be seen with these woods and what I'm going to do with them. But I think if all of the other considerations like the structural ones work out, I think this combination would just make a killer looking guitar. And lastly, I got a lot of Tasmanian Blackwood for some of the other guitars that I want to build for myself this year. And also, I figure I'll be using this a lot in the student workshops. Tasmanian Blackwood is a fantastic wood. And it's difficult to show it after the last two because it's not as stunning. If I hadn't shown you the last two, you would still probably think that this was a pretty stunning looking wood. At least when I put finish on it, you'll see how it really pops out. It's kind of like the love child between mahogany and koa. That's at least how I would describe the appearance of Tasmanian Blackwood. It has a little bit of that shimmer and that figure that koa has, but it also has sort of the pore structure of mahogany. So it looks like a mix between the two. Anyway, I intend to use a lot of Tasmanian Blackwood this year because I used it a lot last year and I just got great results with it, so it's something that I want to continue to use. I am also looking into sort of researching using Tasmanian Blackwood for necks. I think it might be an okay wood in that regard, but again, modulus of elasticity, modulus of rupture, and all those other things that need to be considered. Maybe I should do a whole episode on discerning appropriate neck woods. I think I'll do that. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Future episode to come. You heard it here. Neck woods. I don't take on too many repairs. Income-wise, it's definitely a pretty negligible part of my business, but I do think it's important to take on some repairs in order to grow my understanding of the instrument. So when I consider taking on a repair, I think three ways. One, can I actually service the instrument in a way that makes the customer's experience with the instrument better? Two, can I be compensated justly for my labor? And three, does this actually interest me, or can it grow my understanding of the system of the guitar? So if I look at it that way, if I look at those three things, I can right off the bat, at least for myself, completely disqualify any sort of finish touch-up. I just don't do that. Categorically, I do not do any sort of finish touch-up repair. I get calls or emails about it a lot, and I just don't do that. Finish touch-up, unless you are specifically in the finish touch-up business, you specialize in finish touch-up, that's sort of the one thing that you do well, then I'm not talking about you. But for anyone else, it really doesn't make sense to take on those jobs. I know that some people out there might disagree with me, but it just doesn't generate happy customers, finish touch-up repair, primarily because of the expectations around finish touch-up, that the customer's expectation, as it should be for pretty much anything we do, they expect the best. And finish touch-up is such finicky stuff that you can't always deliver the best. There are some situations where the best thing you can do is prohibitively expensive, meaning you have to strip away the entire finish and refinish the whole guitar, which in that case it's not really finish touch-up, right? That's called refinishing. So that's why I don't even mess with finish touch-up. Also, I don't learn anything of interest to me by doing that sort of work, and that's fine because there are people who really get into that kind of work and they love it, and that's sort of their niche, and I leave that to them. Now, actual finish work I do, as you saw, but finish touch-up, no, I'll pass on that. Anyway, this guitar really interested me because the guy came in and it was his father's guitar. It's a Epiphone Zenith archtop. I'm not a big know-it-all vintage person, but I do know that this guitar doesn't really have any sort of vintage value, which is fine. It really has sentimental value to the customer, and so everything I'm doing is about maximizing the potential of this guitar for that customer so that he can play it and think of his dad when he plays it. He's not overly concerned with maintaining its vintage value or any sort of resale value, so I'm allowed to do things like, for example, the heel cap. I have the original one here. The heel cap was peeling off, and it was, it's just a mess. It's kind of brittle and breaking apart. It's plastic. So instead of peeling this off and re-gluing it, and it's really just done. It's time for it to go. I made a new ebony heel cap, and I gave it a light Tru Oil finish and glued that back on there. I actually used the old plastic one as a template to cut and sand around to get that perfect fit. And then I left a little bit of the old heel cap, the back edge, I left on there when I removed it so that I could slowly file back that edge until the heel cap just dropped right in, if that makes any sense. So I walked back that edge. Originally the heel cap was sitting a little too far forward, and I did this by design, and I kept walking back that edge until it just lined up perfectly. So that's why there's still a thin line of the old heel cap there. That was just my way of getting that to line up just right to basically look like it had been there all along. One of the other things that I did to this already was the binding was unraveling in several places, especially at the waist on both the top and the back. And again, in talking to the customer, we decided between the both of us that what was best was to glue the binding back on where it was coming off and secure the binding enough so that it doesn't continue to unravel, but not to fuss with filling in the little gaps and making the binding look like it did in the 1930s, because that again goes back to being prohibitively expensive. This is not a very expensive guitar. We do what we can. We work with the customer. Lastly, I'm going to put a bone nut on this, because that's something we talked about doing, and give it just an awesome setup. And lastly, I'm replacing this bridge that was already on it with a new, more modern looking bridge than what would have originally been on it, because this wasn't the original bridge anyway. This is definitely not what would have been on this guitar back in the day. Somebody replaced it with this, so we're just going to get rid of that and put something like this on there. Again, not trying to restore it to what it was in the 30s, just trying to make this guitar a better experience for the customer. And finally, just an update on the 2018 workshops here in Burnville, Pennsylvania. I have one student in the March workshop, so we're looking for one more. April is full. I already have 2 students in April. The May workshop has 1 student. The June workshop has 1 student. August and October are still wide open. We're still looking for 2 students in each of those classes. So we're about halfway full, and it's only January, filling up very quickly. So if you're interested in signing up for any of those workshops, just give me a call or email me, and we'll discuss getting you registered as soon as possible. So thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought about this style of DIY guitar making episode. If you got any value out of this kind of content, I'd really like to know, even if you just simply in YouTube, if you like it or dislike it, because I'm just trying to gauge whether I should do this in the future, or whether I should stick to what I've been doing before, which is very specific topics within guitar making.